and salutations, my fellow Skywatchers from all parts of the globe. We're back live once again here on Skywatchers Radio on this beautiful April 16th, 2014. My name's Angel Espino. I'm one of your co-hosts on the show. Along with me tonight, I have Dr. Joseph Mera, who's going to be filling in the co-hosting duties. Joseph, welcome to the show, sir. Thank you for being on tonight. Thank you for being on short notice. And it's always fun to have you on the show. Welcome back.
Hey, thank you for having me.
And tonight we're going to talk to a gentleman who wrote a book that is about to be released. This book is not out yet. I have not read it. Looks super interesting, but I've got to talk to this guy in the last few days, and really, really interesting gentleman. His name is Lance Burton, and he wrote a book called it's called Blood of the Gods, or Blood of a God. I'm sorry, Blood of a God. It's a brand new book. Now, Lance is a former Navy officer and an FBI agent with a long history of interest in the search for the truth behind the veil of what we're told, and of course, UFOs and ufology. So that's going to come up in the next 25 minutes. Lance Burton will be live with us, folks. But we are live now with Joseph. Joseph, how you been, man? It's been kind of a couple months since the last time we heard from you here on Skywatchers.
Yeah, you know what? I've been traveling, and I currently live in New Mexico, and that's where I work and hang my hat, so to speak. And I traveled back to Pennsylvania, and I spent a month there just to hang out with my family and friends, and it was cold, I can tell you that. The East Coast, the Northeast, was really cold compared to New Mexico, so that's why I haven't been on. I've been really doing a lot of traveling, but I'm a little bit grounded here for the next couple months, so hope to be back in the future show for you.
Well, we appreciate you being on here, and we've missed you on the show, man. We've had a lot of really cool guests, and you're one of the special guest co-hosts that we have on the show here, and we always love having you on. There's a lot of stuff in the news going on, but have you seen some of the articles I sent you a little bit ago on Skype? There, did you see the one about the mysterious black ring UFO which was caught in England?
I saw something on Facebook about that, actually, prior to you sending that to me. And I didn't really get a chance to really read up on it. I saw the picture, and I said, wow, that's really interesting,
Well, check this out. The mysterious black ring UFO that was caught in England might not be so mysterious after all. They're saying here, a mysterious picture of what looked like a big black ring of smoke above a town in a Leamington Spa in England, taken on Friday, has been making the news this week. However, the BBC confirmed today that it has been dubbed the Black Ring of Leamington Spa. It's actually a black ring of smoke. The phenomenon is known as a ring-shaped vortex. A common example is a smoke ring like the one blown in The Hobbit or Lord of the Rings by Bilbo Baggins. I don't know if you're a fan, but
oh yeah,
something like that. And as it says here, Doubtful News, Sharon Hill tweeted that on an article that she posted with links explaining how the ring vortex is made, boiled down that as far as I understand, they are created when smoke is forced out of a circular opening. Obviously, if you've ever smoked a pipe and tried to blow out, rings from tobacco pipe, like grandfather used to do. I don't know. Did your grandfather ever used to do that with his pipe? Sit there and smoke a pipe and blow rings out of it?
No, but one of my buddies that I used to work construction with back in the day used to. And so, yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about.
Right. Apparently, this is what this is. It's probably just somebody smoking some medicinal marijuana and blowing some smoke into the air and taking a picture with his iPhone or Samsung Galaxy or something like that. And it's a nice-looking picture. And here we go. It's on the Internet. Now somebody thinks it's a UFO. So let's call that Bat Squatch on this one. Let's just debunk this one right away. So they're saying, yeah, and look, it even says the ring in the video is similar to what witnesses say they saw in Leamington Spa when a 16-year-old girl named Georgina Heap took a picture with her iPhone. And it looks exactly the same thing. So, yeah, this is some guy who was just probably getting high and thought he played a prank on everybody. So this is posted on openminds.tv. Big shout outs to them. We're going to post this also on our Facebook page. If you guys want to check that out, very simple. How to get there is facebook.com/Skywatchers Radio. Please go there, like the page. Really, we need the likes. So like our page, Skywatchers Radio. We post all the news articles that we talk about on there, so you can follow up with what's going on with the latest information in the world of ufology. So what do you think of that? Another hoax, clearly. But
it's so hard to say
funny.
with a lot of these things. You got to use your discernment about it, and it doesn't fit the traditional profile of a UFO. But of course, it's unidentified flying object, and so I mean, it's just a circle or a ring in the sky, and so it's really hard to say. People put things out there to muddy the waters, and if I was there and I saw it with my own eyes, or maybe I'd have a better understanding of what this really was, but I'm not really convinced at this point.
Well, yeah, I'm not convinced that this is legit. I think it's what it is. Somebody smoking medicinal marijuana and using their iPhone or their Galaxy or whatever they wanted to use to create a little smoke in the sky.
What's amazing to me? I'm sorry to cut you off.
Go ahead.
That it gets so much airtime. Like if you've seen the traditional, say, disc in the sky, or some of these particular lights that you see that are floating around on Facebook, but they never make any airtime. But yet this made major news.
Open Minds ran an article on this, and Open Minds is, of course, one of the best sources of information for UFO-related news. For them to run an article on this, that means they really, got everybody's attention. Now, this was written today. So I'm not talking about something that was written days ago. This is a brand new article that was just written on the 15th last night, yesterday, whatever. We're technically now the 16th. But, this is a brand new article. They just ran it, and it got their attention. So, it's funny that it is making the rounds. It's getting people's attention, and it's a hoax. It's BS. But, again, we've talked about that a billion times on the show, with guests that we've had on with me and Alan, even with yourself. There's just so much hoaxing in ufology that it's laughable. And then here we go, another example of somebody creating a hoax. Remember, cameras, everybody, because this is Skywatchers Radio, right? And what do we do here on Skywatchers Radio, Joseph? Right?
Yeah. We try to... Yeah, I get you.
No, well, that's actually a question I always ask Alan, and he always messes it up. So I was expecting for you not to have an answer either. But what we do here is we want to give the audience the proper information and teach them how to learn, or teach them how to really look at information they see on the internet and learn how to properly dissect it. For example, a camera doesn't have great depth perception. If you blow a little ring of smoke into the sky and just let it float a couple feet away from you, and you take the right picture at the right angle, it'll look like a UFO in the sky.
Right, but
that's how a lot of hoaxes are done.
Yeah, and then there's Photoshop, and there's all kinds of technology nowadays. Yeah, and so it's really difficult sometimes because some of these things are so well done that you would want to believe it. You know what I'm saying? That's why we're on here. We're here to talk about these things. I think each one of us have had personal experiences, and it's like, man, let's get to the bottom of this. And so we have these tricksters out there that throw some of the stuff in the mix, and you're like, man, that looks too good. You know what I'm saying?
Tricksters. I'm still upset over the whole alien autopsy video. That, man, I was so hoping that was real.
Oh, you know what? Back in the, several months ago, or maybe it was a prior show that you interviewed me on, you sent me a link about the FBI releasing information about some of this information. Do you remember that?
Vaguely. I've done a lot of shows, man.
Yeah, I know. The reason why I'm saying it is because the guest that we're having on today is former FBI, right? So I wonder if he knows anything about that, and it would be cool to ask him that.
Yeah, that's a good question. Write that down and ask that when we have Lance on the show, which we'll have him on in about 25 minutes or 20 minutes or something like that. We'll have him on. So you can write that down, jot it down, and we'll ask him that. I have other news here I wanted to get to. Check this out. This is kind of, this will be freaky, real freaky if it happened to you, but down in Puerto Rico, a UFO actually followed a woman in her car and chased her. This has been reported out of Puerto Rico, and it actually was reported on the Examiner.com just a couple of days ago. It says here, Puerto Rico witness named Isabella recalled an odd encounter with a disc-shaped UFO that followed her mother's car, according to her, on an April 11th, 2014 testimony in case number 55381. It says here from the Mutual UFO Network, or MUFON. Witnesses reported that while walking home from work with a friend on October 18th, 1990, so it's an old-ass report, when she noticed her mother and two siblings inside their vehicle, scared and pale. She said her mother asked her asked her what happened, and her mother just looked at her, and when the car says here, asked her to watch what happened when she moved the car. Whatever, they miswrote this, but anyway, she says, and I quote here, she moved it, and out from behind of the house towards the cliffside, a huge disc-shaped object came out, and the witnesses stated my mother backed up the car and hit again. Then she pulled forward, and then it came out again. She said her mother then asked her to meet at her home less than a block away. Now, this is, again, a report on theexaminer.com. I'm going to post this again on our Facebook page, so check that out over there. It says here the craft was enormous. There was a low, almost faint hum. There were lights at the bottom flashing and back and forth from front to back in yellow, red, green, blue, orange, all kinds of different colors. All the colors of the rainbow, bright but not primary colors, says crystal, or not like crystal colors or like transparent colors. That's what they described it as. Let me link you also, Joseph, so you can check out the article when you have a chance there. Interesting article, but really, why are they paying attention to articles from something that happened in 1990 where there's no verification, you can't prove anything? It's another one of these articles. Okay, yeah, this happened in 1990. No proof. Just another story to throw into ufology. And getting back to what we were talking about just a couple of minutes ago, Joseph, it's kind of funny that it's just a bunch of stories, man. And where is the hard, concrete evidence? You know what I mean?
Yeah, and the other thing is, in today, fast forward from, what was that, 1990, I think?
1990, correct, yeah.
Yeah, and here we are in 2014, and the technology that I'm sure that our military has today, it wouldn't surprise me to see various craft in the sky because, you have whistleblower after whistleblower coming out and saying, hey, look, I worked on this project and we had these types of vehicles in the air that did this. Look at our drones that they have right now that we are aware of. We're at least 100 years advanced in the military from what the civilians even know about. So today, some of these sightings even currently don't surprise me as much as maybe, say 100 years ago. And so if you look at some of these dated stories, the problem is the people aren't there to interview anymore. And so it's like, what's the real story?
This is not even the person who it happened to. Is like her daughter, is coming forward as a witness. I mean, that's like a second-hand person saying, "Oh well, I kind of saw something because my mother was panicking." And but you can't really go back and prove any of it.
And you made a good example of they miswrote. As you're reading it, you were fumbling with the words because it was miswritten. So that also has to play into this whole scenario.
And this is on the Examiner website. I mean, I was trying to read it there and make the best of what I had. But yeah, it was miswritten. Whoever wrote this just wrote it badly. But it says, she said her mother asked her to watch what happened when she moved her car. She moved it, and out from behind the house toward the cliffside, a huge disc-shaped object came out. The witness stated my mother backed up the car and hit again. Then she pulled forward, and it came out again. She said that her mother then asked her to meet her at their house or her home. Like, how is this even relevant to put on the Examiner? Like, this is what I don't understand about ufology and what's going on with the state of ufology today. Like, why does this even become an article? This is something that happened in 1990, supposedly, and there's no evidence. Why don't they try MUFON? Why doesn't MUFON put a little bit more effort into trying to actually get stories and cases out there that have some kind of evidence or some kind of a concrete, evidence that we can look at and dissect? I mean, there really just isn't. That's the main problem, I think, right, Joe?
Yeah, that's like I've captured the Phoenix lights on my own video camera when I went out to Phoenix, Arizona, and so who do you give this information to? Because I gave it to several different people, and of course it never made the mainstream or anything like that. So I wonder how much information is out there and proof, as you say, that's floating around and people have it, or they're afraid to put it out for fear of ridicule and all these things, because then they're in the limelight or the spotlight, and now they're like, oh crap, why did I do that? Now everybody's calling me crazy, and so there's various reasons why. I think people don't come out, and I'll bet there's probably just boatloads of evidence.
That I agree with. Yep.
There's probably some evidence out there that's just not making it where it needs to make it, though, as you say. I mean, there's better stories. There's got to be.
You know, it's funny. I was talking to a gentleman named Kyle earlier today, who's going to be a host on our PSN radio network, and he was telling me about his beliefs on UFOs and ufology and stuff, and he is really. I mean, he is certain that there's going to be some kind of a false flag UFO invasion or some sort of, government-made false invasion of aliens on this planet. And I'm not too far off behind him, because when you see stuff like this, when you see how much coverage, fake news gets in the world of ufology, where, the Examiner, Open Minds, reputable websites are posting these articles, like if it's news, that tells me there might be something to it, because, who's leaking this information? Who's telling them to put this stuff out there? Why are they putting, stories out there that make no sense, that are just BSing? It's like getting a video from YouTube, with some random hoaxed video, and put it on there and be like, oh yeah, look, there's a UFO on YouTube, and, this is a real disc, and it's some, photoshopped or CGI made alien craft, It's the same kind of concept. There's no hard concrete evidence behind this stuff, and it makes me wonder if what we're being led to, Joseph, it could be some kind of a New World Order strategy to take over the senses of the country and really do some kind of a false flag alien invasion project. And that's scary stuff to think about, but I mean, it's getting more and more annoying to see how many fake reports get so much coverage. I mean, there has to be something behind that. There really has to.
I totally agree. And like I said, I've interviewed so many people over the years, and I've heard the same thing over and over, the potential for that. And then when you look into the holographic technology that we have today, and I mean, it's just amazing. Not only that, but as I said, where are we at with our current technology that they can pull out of a hangar that we think is alien, but it's actually ours? And so they pretend, and they cause fear and doom and gloom, and we got to give up our guns, because if we don't, we need our military to come in and help us and save us, because we can't save ourselves, because there's all kinds of false flags that have happened over the past couple decades, especially. And so it wouldn't surprise me one bit if that's in the cards. So I'm glad you brought that to the table. I don't like to focus on it, but I really believe it's a reality. Absolutely.
Oh, you almost have to. I mean, to be honest, we have to focus on that kind of stuff, because look, and I'm not the first person who's ever said something like that on air. William Cooper years ago said that that's going to happen. Even in his book Behold the Pale Horse, he was very adamant that the government will do something like that at some point in the future. So the fact that you get all these stories that are completely false, getting all this coverage, being put out there by the media, that is a little bit scary when you consider that this was foretold in the 90s by William Cooper. Read the book, Behold the Pale Horse. Read it. I mean, for whatever people think of William Cooper, I know Stan Freeman doesn't like him too much. I know there's a lot of people that take issues with a lot of stuff that Cooper said. A lot of people thought he was a bully or whatever. Look, whatever you thought of the guy, a lot of the things he said makes sense. And a lot of the things he was saying about what the government could be doing with these false flag operations, as scary as it sounds, I would not put it past the government, especially, and it's not just because the evil U.S. government. No, it's not because of that. It's because there are individuals, and we've all talked about it many times on these shows, individuals within the government who have agendas, and there could be some kind of a secret government agency that is trying to take over the world. You never know. I mean, you could call it the New World Order, the Illuminati, call them whatever you want to call them. It could be real. And from the looks of things, it almost does look like that is exactly what's going on. And that is scary as hell. It's scary to think about that Alex Jones might be right after all.
Yeah, what I look at over the years is...
Shout out to Alex Jones, by the way.
The synchronicities that I see, and when more than one person says one thing at one time, you got to raise an eyebrow and say, "Oh my gosh, this person from this other part of the world is saying the exact same thing."
Right.
And so I can't remember. Man, I'm not really tech savvy, so I was trying to think whether I should try to look this woman up. But God, what was her name? She had long, grayish white hair, and she came out and she was talking about. I don't know if it was J. Allen Hynek or, basically she's saying that exact thing.
What was she saying?
On
what I
his
was saying.
deathbed, she said that this gentleman that was in the know of all of this, and this goes back a long time that I was researching, so I'm going back into my memory banks here, so I apologize that I can't give you specifics, but it'll come to me. But all the false flags that they were gonna play this out just like a playbook. And so first there would be one thing, then there'd be another, then there'd be another, then there'd be asteroids that came, and the final card, she kept saying, he said this to her every single day, the final card would be the false flag alien invasion. And so I think we've gone through everything but that. And so now that you got me thinking, because I haven't been into this realm of thinking for a couple years, so you're really pulling on my memory banks, but I could probably find it. For some reason, I think her name was Carol something, but you know what? I'm going to look right now.
You know, by the way, I wanted to mention before we go on break in a few minutes, while you're looking her name up, we just had a blood moon yesterday. I don't know if you got to see it, Joseph, but it was an extraordinary lunar eclipse of the moon, which occurred early on Tuesday, April 15th, and they called it the blood moon, which was really, really cool to look at. Now, I was told, and I don't know if you know about this or not, but I was told that there's going to be 3 blood moons within a 17-month span or something like that. And it was funny because I went online and I started talking to a few people about it after we were camped outside pretty much waiting for this blood moon. And I went to a chat room later on before I went to bed and started chatting with somebody, and they told me, well, there's going to be 3 of them, and there's a prophecy involved, and it's biblical, and by the 3rd blood moon, it will be the end of times.
I have heard that. And in fact, I actually heard there was supposed to be 4 of these within 1 year, and then 5 within the next, say, 2 years.
So
and there's several.
So there's some validity to this because I haven't.
Well,
really
you have to really look
much.
and dig into this kind of stuff. But if somehow these blood moons, they have something to do with. Oh gosh, again, you're pulling on my memory here. It's the.
I'm making you think tonight, Joseph.
Yeah, it's something with the horses, and so people are equating it in the biblical sense. The 4 horsemen are actually equated as these 4 blood moons, and so. In an astrological sense, if you look at the symbolism of when you look these things up, it could be the 4 horsemen, which are said to come about during the end times. And so, yeah, I've done a lot of research over the years with this, but again, I'm so removed from that subject now because, when you do research, you go down all these rabbit holes, and currently it's brought me to this place of spirituality. And so, yes, everything you're saying I've looked into, I've read, but it was back in the day. So you're really challenging me today.
No, but that's funny because they did mention the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse also when they were talking about this. Mind you, it was like 5 in the morning. I was really drowsy, just about to pass out, and here I am on the internet, just all jazzed up, talking about the blood moon.
Yeah,
so,
and I did witness it last night. In fact, I got up, I set my alarm at 1 o'clock here in New Mexico, and I went out and watched this, and I went to bed around 3:30, and yeah, it was amazing.
That's cool. I actually had a real nice shared experience yesterday. As I've said on the show before, my mother's ill at the moment. She's going through chemotherapy and stuff, and battling the big C. And every experience now that I have with her that I've never had before is kind of like a memory that I'm going to cherish for the rest of my life, especially as she gets older and the inevitable happens. And this was something once in a lifetime kind of event because I've never seen a blood moon. Now I find out it's 4 in a year span event, so it's not as special, I guess. But it was special because my mother was like, "Oh, please wake me up at 2 in the morning so we could see this thing." And she went to bed, just really wanted to see it. And at 2:20, I called her because I kind of forgot, and I woke her up and I was like, "Look, I don't think there's anything out there." And we went outside and we couldn't see the blood moon. There was nothing. It was just a regular moon. So we were kind of like, man, we're a little bit upset because we thought we weren't going to get to see it. She goes back to bed. I started going on the internet and looking, up some data on it, and I found out it's going to be at 4 in the morning where we're going to be able to see it here in Florida, or down in Miami anyway. So at 4 exactly, I went and rushed into her room and woke her up, and and got her outside so she could see the blood moon. And that was kind of a neat, experience to have with my mom, something cool, astrological, scientifically, or skywatchy, related. And it was just a neat little experience to be able to share that with her. And message to everybody out there, if you have your relatives, your loved ones, your siblings, your mothers, your fathers, your sons, daughters, if you have them healthy, cherish every moment you have with them, because health goes by real quick. We're here for a very short period of time before we get sick and pass away. So, enjoy having the people you love in your life as much as possible. And with that downer, we're going to go to a quick commercial break. And when we come back on the other side, we're going to have our guest of the evening, Mr. Lance Burton, who's going to be on the show for the next hour with us. And we're going to talk about his book, Blood of a God, From Blood Moon to Blood of a God. So, guys, stick around. This is Skywatchers Radio. You're listening to the Dark Matter Radio Network and, of course, PSN Radio. We'll be right back on the other side. All right, everybody, we are back live on Skywatchers Radio right here on Dark Matter Radio Network, of course. Also on PSN Radio. Want to give a big shout-out to our friends over at TalkStream Live, Bill Freeze and them, who do a good job promoting the show every single week. Everybody listening on Shotcast, if you want to join the chat room, it's over on the psn-radio.com chat room. And if you want to call in and chat with our guest, Mr. Lance Burton, please do so. Our number is 786-245-8127. Also, you can find us on Skype by looking up PSN Radio, and just send us a friend request, and we'll add you, and then we'll add you to the call, and you can ask him whatever you'd like. If you go to our chat room, you'll find information there also, and you could ask any information you want on there, and we'll ask him live on air. So there's a lot of ways to ask questions. You can also Facebook us if you have any questions for the guest. Lance Burton is on the air with us now. Mr. Burton is a 1996 graduate of the U.S. Naval Academy and former surface warfare officer, class leader of BUDS, or BUD/S, Class 239, former Blackwater security specialist, and he is the author of the book Blood of a God, and we're so honored to have you on here, Lance. Welcome to Skywatchers Radio, sir.
Angel, hey, it's great to be on. I'm really happy to be here, getting a chance to talk about this.
Now, let's give the audience a little bit of a background information on yourself, who might not have heard of your book now or of yourself. The book is not out yet, right? When is the book going to be released? Just to give that out of the way.
Yeah, we're real close. The full title is The Blood of a God. It is the first in a series that I'm working on now. We're about 2.5 weeks from release. I'd say, we're in final production stage right now, and it's been a nice, interesting learning curve, learning how the book world works. This is my first major work. So essentially where we're at now is we're finalizing the proofs, and I just went back and reread the whole thing myself to do a final edit, make sure we didn't miss anything, and it will go to the printer probably first part of next week. And as soon as that happens, we're 2 weeks from release. So, about 2.5 weeks probably, right in there.
Now, in your bio, it says you're a former FBI counterterrorist agent. How did you go from that to an author of a book like Blood of a God?
Yeah, right. Yeah, I feel like that essentially it's a long chain of, searching these things out since I was a kid. People ask me how long it took me to write the book, and I say 40 years. I turned 40 this year, and I feel like in a lot of ways the book is, in a sense, a culmination of, many years of study and research and reflection on these things, that started when I was a kid. I was kind of weird that way. I was always interested in these things. I mean, the first book that I ever read that wasn't a kid's book when I was 10 was Cosmos by Carl Sagan. I just found it interesting. My dad had it hanging out in his library. And that was kind of one of the beginnings of, where it started to go from there. And I felt like I was on a quest, a quest to find the truth, whatever that may be, and decided that the only way to really do that was to uncover, everything that's out there. Really take a look at it. And that meant to me you have to be willing to look anywhere. So, over the course of many, many years, it led to, studying every major scientific theory, philosophy, and religion in existence, and trying to sift through it all. Yeah, like a lot of people, I think there's a hunger out there for people that want to find the truth. They're interested in the truth. I mean, many of the listeners tonight, I'm sure, are kind of, out there. They're searching. We want answers. I mean, people, I think, that are turned this way. We want to take a look at and be honest with ourselves, honest with the evidence, and like you were earlier in the piece before the break, we want to see the evidence. And I think that's where I'm at. I was always a big believer that, if you want to believe something, that's cool, but let's show why. I want to know why.
Right.
And in my case, I didn't grow up in church. I didn't go to church as a kid. I wasn't, indoctrinated that way. And so what that led to was a kind of a full-fledged search of all of it. I ultimately chose to become a Christian as an adult after many, many years of study and reflection. We'll get into some of that and why. But that being said, to me, I think that there's a misnomer in the world in the sense that, if you say, hey, I'm a Christian, I believe the Bible, that somehow means that I don't accept anything that science has to say. In fact, I think it's the opposite. My belief is that the true facts of science and the true facts of Scripture actually fit together great. We may have some differences on interpretation and things like that, and I understand that there's a lot of gray area there in the minds of a lot of people. But ultimately, if we're seeking for the truth and we're willing to look under all those little rocks that are out there, I think there's a lot of answers that can be found.
I completely agree with you. In fact, I was having a conversation with somebody else earlier tonight, and we're almost exactly word for word what you just said we're discussing. And it's funny how, as I was saying earlier tonight on the show here before we went to break, it's funny how it is becoming so laughable, the stories that do make it out in the mainstream media. And it's almost there's something sinister behind what's going on. I mean, would you agree that there is something sinister behind the scenes?
I think so, and I'd like to get into why I think that.
Okay.
I think that the thing that we have to look at is kind of like what you mentioned. There's so much misinformation, right? And this field is one of those places where it's a little bit touchy, and this is probably a good place to make sure I tell the listeners, hey, I'm here as an individual. Yes, I have this professional background that has given me some great experience, and I wouldn't trade it for the world. I spent 13 years in the Navy and got a chance to do a lot of things, and then time with Blackwater, and then, of course, with the FBI. But I'm not here representing them in any kind of an official capacity. I'm here just as a guy who is interested in finding the truth and, I've had that professional experience. But, the fact of the matter is that the evidence is what matters. Whether I was an FBI agent or not, or whatever I was, it still comes down to what the evidence is, right? So I think the evidence is pretty clear that, there is definite misinformation being put out by some people that maybe, just don't know better or just, perhaps misinterpret the facts. But it would appear that there is some agenda on some level to misrepresent certain things that, I think that we should really take a hard look at. And an example of that, one of my favorite examples is how, the media tends to shy away from people that have, credible stories, and then they kind of get onto these tabloid stories as a way to, we have cases that are very well documented of everybody from, fighter pilots, commercial pilots, professionally trained observers, and people like that who have seen phenomenon all over the world, tracked them on radar. There are fighter pilots out there that if you pin them down and you had a chance to talk to them where they didn't feel like their career was in jeopardy, they would tell you, I was chasing this craft in an F-18, and I saw it go 6,000 miles an hour on a radar and do a 90-degree turn.
And nobody in the media is talking about that, Lance. That's the crazy part. They don't talk about that, but they talk about some ring of smoke in a picture that somebody took with their iPhone. That's what makes headlines. That's what gets me. You know what I mean? That's what's amazing to me. There are people like that out there, and the problem is there's never any hard evidence to stuff within the ufology community, but there is credible people that we could listen to their evidence, and like you're saying, it looks like they just go with the tabloid stuff. But does it really shock you? I mean, we live in a tabloid-centric society.
Yeah, I think there's a sensationalism of that kind of 24 hours. It's kind of taken over the minds of some people, and let's face it, that's what sells right now.
Yeah.
And everything. The old saying my pastor used to say all the time is, if it doesn't make sense, there's a buck in it. So that's what sells. And there's many outlets media, newspaper and otherwise, that are more interested in making money than they are talking about the truth. And, unfortunately, that taints the real evidence that's behind that. I mean, we have cases of millions of people throughout the world who have, seen phenomenon that are credible, and it doesn't have anything to do with photoshopping things or anything else of that nature, So there's definitely things to look at. In fact, I think that what's interesting right now in this current moment is, you can even look on History Channel. One of the most popular TV shows right now in the country is Ancient Aliens, with Giorgio Tsoukalos and the whole crew there.
Oh, yeah. Love those guys.
Yeah, it's a great show. I've watched pretty much every episode. I would disagree on one level with their conclusions on the how issue.
One level? I could write a whole entire novel on all my disagreements with that show.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think fundamental disagreements with certain elements of it, but the thing about the show that I like is that they are definitely uncovering certain amounts of physical evidence that can't be denied that there's something going on with it, right? One of my favorites, and I probably should spend a little bit of time talking about, my years of research and, the kind of the chain that I went through coming to these conclusions. And I'd like to mention a couple of men in particular. One who's actually internationally known very well throughout the community of believers is Dr. Chuck Missler. He's kind of been, in some sense, one of two of my de facto pastors/teachers for almost 20 years now. And this guy, I mean, he's very articulate. He's his information. He goes to great lengths to uncover, the details of the information, and puts together some of the best packages of information about these topics that you're ever going to find. And again, this isn't a sales pitch. It's really more for so people know about it. You can go to his website, khouse.org. Cohenyehouse is the actual name, but they go under khouse.org for the website. And there's a thing in there for topical studies, and you can go down and look for the alien/Nephilim line there. And there's a couple of things in there, one being the Alien Encounters Conference that he did with a guy named Dr. Mark Eastman, phenomenal speaker. I mean, these guys are serious researchers that know their stuff, okay? And you got hours worth of material in there you can get for free, or even just order it on DVD if you want the actual video part. And they walk through a lot of the details of what we're talking about tonight. Now, I'm going to add some stuff to that, and I'm going to add some of my own thoughts to it. But, we're here to help educate, the people that are listening to the show.
Correct,
Another good one is this guy named Dr. Peter Buckland, kind of a controversial figure to some degree, but I love the guy. He's a great teacher. He's 91 this year. He's been preaching for 62 years.
Wow.
He's got a great study that he, sells through his website. And again, I'm not trying to play salesman. I want people to know where to look. KJV1611.org is the website. He has a particular briefing on this topic that goes for 16 hours of material.
Wow.
That states fact that he started doing this in the 70s when he was doing, part of a radio show, and it's been updated obviously over the decades. Okay, but I mean, there's hours and hours of material out there from credible people that are good researchers that they know what they're talking about. It's not all National Enquirer type stuff.
Right, but the problem is these guys don't have kooky hair and a nice outfit, and they don't, look funny on camera, so they don't have the attention that like a Georgia Tsoukalos would get on Ancient Aliens, and that's why a lot of the information just gets buried, unfortunately.
Sure, absolutely, it does. So for the people that are listening, there is a great deal of credible information that you can sift through. I mean, those are two of my favorites. There's more than that. That goes into this whole thing, this whole issue. Because, again, we come back to the topic. What is the truth? That's what we want to know. That's why we're here. That's what, yes, And, it has an impact on us, right? I mean, this is the thing that I try to tell people is that, this kind of seems like a fringe topic. if people are a little bit shy to get discussing it because they don't want to be labeled, kind of a weirdo or whatever.
Nut, yeah, UFO nut. They don't want to be labeled that. Yeah.
The fact of the matter, though, is that the existence of extraterrestrial life, true or false, will have an impact on our whole society and our world. So to me, it seems like a reasonable thing to be interested in knowing what the truth is, right? I mean, so that's the basis I think that we should start from when we begin researching.
Right. Actually, Joseph here had a question for you. Joseph, you had something for Lance? Want to ask him?
Oh no, I was letting him go with his flow there. I hated to break the thought there, but we were talking prior to, and maybe you'll be getting into this thing, but I just wanted to put this out there for the listeners just for clarification, because I was saying J. Allen Hynek, but it was actually von Braun, and this lady's name was Dr. Carol Rose, and we were talking about the possibility of this. The one world government or the Illuminati and all those kind of things. And I'm not sure if you're going to get into this, but since you made me come in here, Angel, I'm just going to throw it out there while I have the opportunity. For Lance's, she says that on his deathbed, that they were talking about, according to von Braun, the space-based weapons, later known as Star Wars program.
Right.
There was this. It was being promoted as a shield against the Russians at first. And then later on it would become like a defense against rogue nations. And then later on it would be the protection against asteroids and meteors. And the final card, and this is what you were talking about, Angel, before we brought Lance on, was finally they would be presenting like a safeguard against extraterrestrial threat. And this is where this whole show was all about. And I'm interested to see if Lance has any information about that, or if he's going to get into that, or if I kind of spoiled anything by bringing it up at this moment.
Lance?
Well, I do have a lot of thoughts about it, and we can get there. We can definitely get there. Again, I think one of the, for the reader, not the reader, the listener, is that, I think it's really important that we show the chain of thought. I don't want to jump into my conclusions, which I've spent a long time developing, without giving a little bit more background. So let's do some more background work, and then let's get to that.
Great.
Well, let's do a little bit more background work here. Now, as a former FBI agent yourself, what interested you? I mean, did you get any cases ever handed to you that had to deal with sightings or anything like that? I mean, did you ever see anything when you were as an FBI agent?
No, my work as an agent started out as a counterterrorism agent. Later, I branched over into what was called the Violent Crime Major Offenses Squad, which, essentially dealt with everything from gangs to drug dealers and, whatever.
Right.
I had a reputation for being pretty aggressive, so I was frequently on jobs with other units within the outfit, if that makes sense. So, I was there. I took a very altruistic view to my service. My whole goal growing up, quite honestly, was and really it's kind of, going on to this day, is I wanted to be the best warrior and leader I could. That really was my primary motivation, just as an individual from a professional point of view. So when I approached, joining the Navy, when I approached, going through the various training that I did, and then later joining the Bureau, I feel like there was a very idealistic, altruistic kind of, I'm here to help catch bad guys type mentality, and that's how I viewed the job, And so because of that, if there was anything going on, I was always dying to get involved. I wanted to be in the middle of whatever I could. So, with that, and maybe we can get into some of that as we go along. I don't want to spend a whole lot of time because, again, no matter what the experiences are as an agent, that still comes down to what the evidence is for these things. So let me answer your question. I did not know. I never got handed a case, an X-Files case. In fact, it was always kind of a joke amongst us as agents that, there really is no X-Files squad and so forth and whatever. There's not. We actually.
So there was no scholar. There was no scholar in Mulder, or Mulder and Scully, I should say.
Not that I never met. So no, but most of my cases are pretty straightforward that I was involved with. Like I said, counterterrorism stuff, and gang stuff and, whatever, kidnappings and so forth. I was stationed down on the border in McAllen, Texas. So, there's a lot going on down there, as you may or may not know. Mm-hmm. Pretty violent area. A lot of major crime going on there. So, it was actually a pretty good fit for me in a lot of ways that way. I got a chance to do a fair amount of street work that, isn't normal for an agent. And I was still in the learning stage and stuff, but maybe later on in the show I'll talk a little bit more about why I chose to leave. But yeah, no, I didn't have any.
It had nothing to do with aliens or UFOs, your decision to leave, though, right?
Yeah, no UFO stuff.
Okay. So you never saw anything related at all at the agency? Like, I know obviously you probably can't talk about it if you did, but just give me I can't talk about that.
Yeah, well, here's I had a pretty.
We'll take that as a yes, but we'll have to go further.
Well, I had a pretty high security clearance, but it wasn't one that was abnormal for an agent in my position. I had what was called a top secret SCI, secret special compartment of information classification, which is, it sounds big, but it really isn't anything particularly special amongst those who are in that position, So, I had a tendency to read a lot of reports and so forth, and I spent time with that, but nothing about UFOs and stuff like that. It was all, crime-based and, just learning the ropes and so forth with my cases. So.
Now, The Blood of a God. Let's get into the book a little bit. I don't want to give too many spoilers because I want the audience to check it out themselves and buy it. But tell us a little bit about the book itself so the audience knows about it.
Okay, yeah, so the book, there's a lot of layers going on in the book, okay? The reference to the title, the title, what it's referring to is the main character's heritage. So let me give you like a snapshot. When I tell people that I run into about the book and I give them the surface layer, what we basically have is a military sci-fi adventure story, okay? The main character is based on my daughter. My daughter is currently 3. Well, she's going to be 3 this week. And in the book, she's 35. And so she is the essentially the basis for the main character.
Okay? So you're predicting your daughter's future, very John Connor-ish of you.
Oh, right. Well, when my wife and I got married, I told her, I'm like, look, whether we have a boy or a girl, we're going to get trained. I've been a lifelong practitioner of martial arts and all the warrior stuff and whatever. She can do all the girly stuff, but she's going to get trained. That was the agreement. So, and I stand by that. When she's 18 and she wants to go on and do whatever she wants with it, that's up to her. In the meantime, she's getting trained. So, in the book, I kind of take some literary license there and just assume that she kind of followed my footsteps. Okay. And then where we go from there, though, is the real branch off that gets into, what appears to be the more fringe side is the connection to the Bible and Genesis chapter 6. And this is where we got to start getting into that, because to make sense of where I'm going with it, you have to understand a little bit of the background. Okay, so for those out there that are listening that don't really know a lot about what the Bible says about the topic, if you go back to Genesis chapter 6, now, and I want to get into why I think this is a serious text to pay attention to, and we'll get to that. Okay.
Okay.
But there. And again, I want to reiterate, I didn't start out as a Bible-believing Christian guy, okay? I started out, I was heavy into all kinds of stuff. Especially Indian mysticism, meditation, I got into everything, man, all the New Age stuff, chakra healing, and, I was interested. I wanted to know what the deal was. I was very into martial arts, so that tends to bring with a little bit of Eastern philosophy, it's very Zen, and, learning to, do your koans and stuff for Zen meditation and all. I was really into all that. So I've kind of ran the gambit on, where with that path that led to where I'm at now. But for the book's sake, I got to at least give you the reference, okay? So if you go in here, and I got it sitting in front of me, Genesis chapter 6. Verse 2, and the sons of God saw the daughters of men that they were fair, and they took them wives of all which they chose. Okay, And you go on down and you get through, and, there were giants on the earth in those days, and also after that, when the sons of God, small s, capital G, came into the daughters of men, and they bare children to them, the same which became mighty men, which were old men of renown. Now, what that's saying is, and here's what it's saying, and again, whether you believe it or not, this is what it's saying, okay? It's saying that there was a period of time in history when an angel, what we think of as a spiritual being,
not me,
like a no-kidding angel, right?
Okay.
Gave up his spiritual form to become mortal so that he could have a relationship with human women. And the offspring of that is called the Nephilim.
Right.
Okay? So the children are the ones that are kind of like the half-breeds, the hybrids, okay? Right. But originally what you had was and this is where you got to get into understanding the text in the Hebrew and how that sentence structure works, okay? The reference of the sons of God, anytime you see that particular phrase in the Old Testament, small s, capital G, the sons of God, that is a reference to angels, okay, right. Every time. Okay, so what you have is that in this case, you have these angels that gave up somehow in a way we probably can't understand their celestial form in order to become mortal. But my contention is, and this is where I take literary license and then apply it, and I'm going to show you why, is that, okay, let's say this is true. Let's just, for humor me, I happen to believe that the Bible is right, okay? But even if you don't, humor me for a minute. If an angel who was there at the moment of creation, and there's other places in the Bible that say that, okay, and he has this supernatural intelligence and supernatural level of knowledge, and he's been flying around the universe for who knows how long, right? And you give up that celestial body, that doesn't mean you gave up your intelligence or your knowledge. So if that's
right.
the case, what could you build? I mean, if we today, as human beings, can build, space shuttles and Hubble telescopes, and, we're talking about, finding ways around the relativity problem with Einstein's theory so we can figure out how to go to the stars and all that stuff, which I'm a huge fan of, by the way. If that's the case, we're doing genetic engineering, we're doing all these advanced technological things that are really in some ways a rediscovery of, I believe, ancient knowledge, okay? What could you do if you were an angel that had that level of intelligence and that level of knowledge? What could you build? I mean, you could build a whole bunch of stuff.
Oh,
right?
yeah, no, you could build worlds.
Exactly. So
yeah.
For me, I'm contending in the book that this actually took place at a point in time where these angels gave up their celestial form to become mortal in order to do this. And then what has happened is that DNA sequence has been passed along throughout generations, and occasionally, without any way of telling when or how, will manifest itself in a particular bloodline. Okay? And that is where you get certain individuals that have extreme levels of talent that you can't explain. Okay? People that have extreme levels of intelligence, extreme levels of physical ability, extreme levels of insight, and things that you can't just say, well, they just trained for it. I mean, there are people out there that, like I always joke around, I've been an athlete my whole life, but you could train me for as long as you want, I'm never going to play basketball like Michael Jordan, right? I mean, it doesn't matter.
Same here.
Doesn't matter how long I practice. I would never play like him. Right?
But you got to agree, though, everybody has their own talent in their own way. I mean, you just got to harness and find what that talent is in each individual person.
Exactly, and I would like to make sure that the people listening know that I'm not trying to minimize any of those. I mean, there are people out there that have, great talents that are very, very highly underrated. There's people out there doing, great work in all sorts of ways, from whether it be the farmer or all the way up to whatever you want to call it. It doesn't really matter what your profession is. There are people out there with extreme talent in certain areas, and that's occasionally manifests. Now, sometimes it's just, you're born with some great talent. God gave you some talent, and you're working with it. But what I'm arguing is occasionally this DNA strain manifests itself in a special way. And you can't know when it's going to happen. Okay?
Okay.
So, and this is the kind of where the book is going. Where in the book, she inherited that. She inherited what I call in the book a full dose. Okay? Now, I'm not saying that she really did, even though the character is based on my daughter, but for the sake of the story, I'm arguing that she did.
Right,
okay?
right.
So, anyway, so that's the start. That's kind of like the jumping off point for the story, is that she's this person who has inherited this genetic strain that gives her special capability above and beyond. Like in the book, she has kind of like maximum human ability for strength, speed. She has telepathy, things like that, okay, or kind of things that she's able to do. And then over the years, I trained her in the various martial disciplines. And then at some point, and I'll kind of give away a little bit just to kind of give a teaser to the folks out there that might be interested in taking a look at the book. At some point in time in her future, and I argue that it's when she's a teenager, I introduced her to a guy who was a master of mine who was from the Orion constellation. Okay? So in the book, what we have is a race of beings who currently exist on Orion, who have a society there, a culture there. They actually are there, They live there. They grew up there, in this whole world that they've, put together. But their root is not that they evolved on Orion. They actually came from here and went there with one of these original angels that left their first estate, as it says in the Bible. Okay? So now what we've got is a situation in the book where one of the originals, and when I say the originals, I mean one of the original angels that did that, has, become essentially kind of like, I call him the emperor in the book. He's the leader of the Orion culture society, the supreme, ruler. And he pretty much decides that, with all my capability and strength and beauty and intelligence, I ought to be running the earth. So I'm going to make sure that happens, and I'm going to send an advanced expeditionary force back to prepare the earth for my coming in and taking over. Okay? And in the book, my daughter leads this special team called Talon Squad in a kind of a fight, a race against time in the shadows. So there's Orion operatives that have been operating for generations here on Earth. They've been combating that. Her master, who is also my master in the book, this guy named General Cattell from Orion, he, helps them, do this, this fight against them. And then it becomes obvious that the expeditionary force is en route to Earth, and then they help lead a defense of the Earth against this invasion. So that's kind of the surface layer of the book, okay? But there's a whole lot more than that actually going on if you really want to get into it. So, but I don't want to give away too much.
No. I don't want you to give away the whole entire book, but it sounds fascinating so far. It's funny, what made you think about writing this book with your daughter in mind? I mean, originally.
Well, when I actually kind of had a concept for the book 10 years ago, but it was written. I started writing it from a fantasy point of view, more like a fantasy story, kind of like a Game of Thrones type, setting. And I got started on it and had the same characters, except for I was the hero, of course. This is 10 years ago, and you're a little bit younger, and no kids, not married at the time.
Everybody wants to be the hero in their story. Yeah, I get it.
Now that I have a little girl, and I just love being around her and being with her, and I have such great hopes for her, I thought it would be more fun to make her the hero. So that was, ultimately kind of what led to that. And I think that, in some ways it was just the wrong timing when I started before. I started it, worked on it a little bit, shelved it, and said someday I'm going to come back to this. And then what happened is, last year, I signed on with this, security team, Spec Ops Service. And, there was a break in my work with them, just from a deployment point of view, we decided to, I decided to back off for a little bit and so forth. And so I kind of had a gap there. I had some time to fill. And, one day I'm just talking to my mom on the phone. And I'm like, you know what? I want to write that book I've been meaning to write for 10 years now. And it just started happening. I sat down and I started writing it. I wrote that prologue that I think I sent you a copy of.
Yeah.
I wrote the prologue, and I'm like, you know what? I got something good going on here. I need to go. I need to keep going. And I got into a flow. I get up every morning. I drink my Rockstar, get a little caffeine, and sit down and start writing, and it started coming together. And, it was a really cool relationship going on with my mom helping, because what we did is at the end of each day, I would send whatever material I had written for the day, and she would kind of go over it, read it, tell me if she had any thoughts about what to change or what should be different or what wasn't clear or, whatever. And I would just do it again the next day. And so the book actually I got done with it really fast. I wrote it in 6 weeks.
Wow.
Which
that's great,
my publisher is amazed about, So, it came together. It's actually taken a lot longer to produce the book than it did to write it in my case. So that was kind of the genesis of it. I had time on my hands. Felt like writing, and just got into a flow, and I felt like there was something special going on, and just made a push to get it done.
Wow, that's really cool. And you're only a few weeks away from putting this out. Now, how cool is that? You'll be able to tell your daughter one day in the future that, honey, I wrote this book with you in mind.
Well, I joke around about, the fact that if anybody ever says, yeah, you're one of those Bible-believing old-school traditionalists, I'll bet you're, like a lot of these old guys that think that, women should still be in the kitchen. The first thing I'm going to tell them is, well, my wife is a four-boarded doctor, forensic neuropathologist, who's a medical examiner, and I wrote a novel about my little girl saving the earth. So if that tells you,
yeah,
if that tells you anything about what I think women are capable of, that ought to be enough.
That's very true. That's funny. What does your wife think of the book? I'm sure she loves it, right?
Well, she thinks it's great. She's honestly, we laugh about it because she really would rather see it as a movie. And that's actually kind of one of the things that's come up recently is that everybody who has pre-screened the book, I had a handful of readers. What I did is, in the writing business, they had what they call alpha and beta readers. And so I sent copies out to, about 10 people that I knew. And I tried to pick people that were very different. I didn't want like just military guys. I wanted to have kind of the gambit of personalities, professional backgrounds and things that were very different, so I would get a better cross-section of what people thought. And so far, everybody has loved it. And Stephanie, my wife, she thinks it's great. She's not a reader, and part of that is because, she feels like she spent her whole life in the book, becoming a doctor. So at the end of the day, when she's done with her job, the last thing she wants to do is sit and read,
Right.
So she read it for me, but we've been talking about how she'd much rather see it as a movie. Everybody so far who has read it thinks the same thing, and we're actually in the beginnings of discussions about making that happen.
It does sound like it would make a great movie. It really does. So you're in discussion now. Is there a studio involved?
Not yet. Where we're at with it at this point is the publishing house that I went with is a smaller publisher, but part of the reason that I picked them is because they're actually a subsidiary of a much larger publisher. And I don't want to name them exactly because I don't want to put them out there and, make it sound like that, they're in a corner or anything. But, one of the guys who works for the parent company, finally read my book, and part of my contract with the smaller publisher was, and part of the reason I chose them was because part of that contract was that the parent company would review it and consider it for a bigger contract. Okay, so, there were other publishers that were interested, but, I chose this one partially for that reason. The other reason is they had good professional credentials and so forth, and everything seemed very. My rep that I talked to, I really liked. We got along real well. But that was a big one for me, because obviously as a new writer, getting into the writing business and actually picking up what they call a traditional contract is not an easy task, So having that opportunity for them to review it, I thought was really important. So they finally did it like 2 weeks ago, and the guy loved it. So he called me up and he said, hey, I screen 500 books a year, and yours is easily in the top 10. So here's what we want to do. We got a kind of we had kind of like one of those discussions about where we go from here kind of thing. I don't want to pin anybody down at the parent company, but we're kind of going right now is we're looking at the possibility at least of securing a contract to finish the series. And then there's some serious discussion going on about finding a screenwriter to transform it into a screenplay. And we have some relationships through the publisher with a fairly major, in fact, a very major movie company. Okay, so there's a lot of talk about it. I mean, I don't want to guarantee the people listening that it's going to happen, but that's what I want to happen. I'd really love to see it made into a movie. But of course, I want to finish a series too, and I'm actually just getting ready to start book 2. So we're getting close.
Have you thought of maybe turning it into a comic book series, also like a long-running comic book series?
Exactly. In fact, I just talked to the guy that's helping me put the book together and the production side about that. I have a gentleman who's a great artist and everything else. He's a great businessman. Who's helped me with the production side, and we talked about that. We want to do a graphic novel or a webcomic or along those lines, and then see where it goes from there. But definitely that's in discussion at this point.
Oh, that's very cool, man. That's very, very cool. I can just imagine growing up with that around me. Your daughter's going to have a really nice time in the next few years, especially if the books do really, really well. It does sound like a really great idea for a movie, and it's funny how these certain topics are really popular right now. Like anything related to anything like this is really, really popular. But do you have any other ideas in your mind of other books you want to write, or you're going to stick with this for a while?
Well, I want to do the series. The series, the book 2, and I want to finish too with some more stuff about book 1 in a minute. But
okay,
book of which I'm getting ready to start writing, essentially is going to start with kind of a flashback.
Okay, so it's going to be the second series to this same storyline. Okay.
Yeah, so it'll be the second book in the series. We're going to do at least 3. I have 3 that I've already, have kind of mapped out. If necessary, we'll extend that out to maybe 6. I like doing groups of 3, and I have plenty of material. It's a matter of how long we want to make each novel. One of the things I did with this one is I purposefully cut it at about 300 pages or so because I wanted the reader to not feel overwhelmed with my first work. I'll tell you what, even as a reader, I mean, you go pick up some of these big novels, man, and it gets pretty intimidating. You feel like you got a bit... you go, and I've got to love them. There's guys out there like Brandon Sanderson who just wrote this, humongous fantasy novel. And if you go pick it up at the store and you set it on the desk, you feel like you have like a tome from the Middle Ages,
I had a guest of mine, Lance, who sent me his book. He's like, "Oh, you'll get through it in about a month. It's not that long. I just put it out a week ago, and here I'll send it to you." I get the book, and it's like almost 700 pages, and I'm like, "Really? This is going to take me a year to get through 700 pages. Who writes that much?"
Oh, it's I really
great guest,
wanted to cap. Yeah, I wanted to cap it, because I feel like. You're reading for entertainment, but at the same time, you're to learn something, as they read, and you don't want to feel like you got to give up your life to read this book, So, the chapters are short on purpose. The length is considered to be a mid-length novel. It's just long enough to be kind of a full-fledged novel. In the writing business, about 90,000 words is considered kind of a normal mid-length. That's right around, we capped it, and actually the flow actually worked out well to cap it there, So that kind of took what I call the George Lucas approach to writing the book, and what I kind of mean by that, of course, is those of us that have been Star Wars fans and sci-fi fans, a long time, you see there's a pattern, right? I mean, the way he always does his storytelling is you start it out with an action sequence,
right,
and then you tell the backstory, kind of develop the characters, and then you build to an epic ending, right?
Right.
And so that's the style that I chose to go with in the book is, I start out in the middle of the action, then I spend some time, developing the characters so you know who everybody is and what's going on and why they're coming together, what the point of the whole thing is, and then it builds to an epic conclusion that I've even told that people got teary-eyed reading the end of it. So I hope it really, has an impact on people.
That's so cool, and it's a good reference to George Lucas. I'm a huge Star Wars fan, by the way. Huge Star Wars. It's a great reference. Anytime somebody can bring up Star Wars, I'm happy. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, I got to tell you, I was at opening night with my dad and my brother in 1977.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah, I mean, I was 4 going to see the movie, and I was, ever since, I think I wanted to be a Jedi Knight, right? So, like millions of other kids. But
That's been my dream since I was a child. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I mean, great storyteller. I mean, he capitalized on a vision that no, at the time, I don't think anybody really understood what he was trying to do.
Yeah.
And then it became this phenomenon, and I think that my hope here is that we have so much depth, in the story. It's not just a sci-fi novel, in my opinion. It's not. It's not.
We could be talking to the next. We could be talking to the next George Lucas right now with you, Lance.
Say it again.
That we could actually be talking to the next George Lucas with you. You could be the next George Lucas. I mean, this does sound like a great story for a movie. It really does. So.
I would like to think that maybe it could get to that point. But let's let it take its course. I mean, I really believe in the book. There's a lot of layers going on, and I think part of what I love about it is I don't think you're going to get the whole story reading it the first time. I mean, you're going to have to read it multiple times before you start figuring out everything that I've got layered into it.
Now, are you looking to direct in the future also, or just looking to stay as a writer?
That's a good question. I mean, I was talking to my wife about it today. If we do a movie, which obviously is one of the goals here, I'd kind of like to be in it as as the general. And the people that finally read the book, they'll know who that is and what their reason for that would be. But we want it to be successful. I'm not a professional actor, although I think I could do a good job at it. I think it'd be a good fit. I mean, I wrote the character. I know, who he is. But as far as directing, I'd really, I have a pretty good vision, and a lot of my writing style, it's very visual in the sense that when I write what I'm seeing in my mind. And then, when it comes to the action scenes, actually a lot of the action scenes were inspired by music. I'm a lifelong, workout athlete guy, and, everyone's got their soundtrack for the gym, whatever. And, for me, I've always been one of those guys that as I listen to certain songs, it inspires a certain, vision in my head, what would be going on with that. And, there's certain songs that hit me a certain way, and it provided this inspiration as to how an action scene might, play out. And so that's how it came out in the book. I think there's a lot going on there that we could capitalize on, for the movie. But at the same time, the book is very layered, and there's a lot going on, and that actually could branch us off into something I want to get into. Because we're still we're talking about the topic is searching for the truth, so I don't want to totally get away from that. And before I came on tonight, one of the things that we discussed was that I had kind of a unique concept about the origins of some of these things. And so, if you don't mind, when we get a chance here, I'd like to at least lay out a little bit more of that.
Definitely, yeah, that definitely is where we're going to go with next. But we do have to take a quick commercial break, Lance. So let's leave that as a tease. When we come back on the other side of the break, we'll get into more of that discussion. Guys, you're listening to Skywatchers Radio right here on the Dark Matter Radio Network and, of course, PSN Radio. Please call in. We have open lines. Also, if you want to ask Lance any questions, 786-245-8127. You can find us on Skype. Look up PSN Radio. We'll be back in a couple minutes from break. All right, everybody, we're back on Skywatchers Radio. You're listening live again on the Dark Matter Radio Network and PSN Radio. Check us out on Facebook. Once again, the URL is facebook.com/Skywatchers Radio. We're live with Mr. Lance Burton, the author of The Blood of a God. And it's an interesting book. It hasn't come out yet, but you're going to be able to get it everywhere. Barnes & Nobles, Amazon, all the cool places where all the kids buy the books these days. And it's amazing how many people still read and buy books. I love that. It's really amazing. Yeah, it's amazing. People still buy books. I mean, you have no idea how many books I sell under my Amazon store, Lance, all the time, because I have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of books, and I read them. I read a lot of them, but obviously they take up a lot of space, and I put a lot of that stuff on Amazon, and it sells so quickly. So it's always encouraging to know that people are still reading hard books, and that still sells. It's a beautiful thing. It really is. Now, when we're on break, Joseph had a great question for you, and I wanted to lead into this question, but also you left with a tease before the break, so I want you to start there, and then Joseph will jump in and ask his question. So continue with the tease you left us on before we went on break.
Yeah, so I think where we left off is coming back full circle, to the issue of why we're here. We're here to give the listener the tools to equip them to find the truth on their own. Like I said on break, we were chatting. I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'm here to tell you why I think what I think and what has led to that, and to try to inform you that, I've spent now going on 30 years of my 40 years on this earth, studying these matters in some detail, and have spent thousands of hours researching it. So, my ideas are well thought through. Now you may come to a totally different conclusion, and I'm fine with that. But I want the listener to know that there is credible information, and there are things out there that you can look at to help you wade through this mess and entangled, mess of stuff that is all over that's misinformation, right? So for me, I want to get into a little piece, and we're going to have to get back on the Bible, and, I don't want to spend time necessarily preaching, and that's not my point, but, for me, the Bible is more than just a spiritual book. It's a history book, and I came to that conclusion as an adult. I came to the conclusion that, there's a lot more going on in this book than just some cool sayings for how to live your life. That it's actually a lot deeper than that, and there's a lot of things in there that we need to be paying attention to. And, if you really take a serious look at it, it's like we started out, if we're here to find the truth, that means we can't deny looking at all sources. This is why coming through, I read the Quran, I read the Book of Mormon, I read the Vedas, I read, Carl Sagan's work, I've read Richard Dawkins' work, I've read, Stephen Hawking, and, all that. I mean, all the major stuff that's out there, Selfish Gene, Pale Blue Dot, Brief History in Time, all the science stuff, because, look, it's another area where you need to be educated. You need to know why they're saying what they're saying. And even though I have some disagreements with them on some of the things they say, it doesn't mean I discount everything. The current guy now who's a big shot is Neil deGrasse Tyson. Man, what a fun guy, right? Great personality. He's, it's to me, it's like the true American story. Here's this guy. He's an astrophysicist. Not exactly a sexy position that would normally find itself into the mainstream media, but he's capitalized on his personality, and that's the American way. And God bless him for that. We happen to have some differences in our ways of viewing the evidence, and some of the things out there. But at the same time, it doesn't mean I can't learn from the guy. I've got.
You got to admit, though, he is a great speaker, though. Look, science for a long time didn't have that voice like an Albert Einstein or somebody who was that, fun to listen to, I guess, or and that knowledgeable. And he is a great speaker. But there are other scientists out there that are great speakers also. He's not the only one, but he does a good job. His show is really good, the Cosmos Show. I really enjoy that show. But what's your differences with him?
Yeah, I have Star Trek Radio on my list of podcasts that I listen to, and I love listening to it because I've always been into that stuff. When I first got to the Naval Academy, my intent was to be an aerospace engineer. Ultimately, changed that for reasons that I don't want to bore the listeners with. I didn't decide to pursue it, partially because I was so focused on more of my physical and martial art training and so forth. It became a little bit of a burdensome concept. The number of credit hours you already take there, no matter what your major is pretty heavy on the math, science, and engineering at the Naval Academy. So even if you're an English major, which I wasn't, but even if you were, you still took, a huge amount of math, science, and engineering as part of your core curriculum. Right. I decided not to pursue that degree specifically, but even so, had my fair share of, engineering and math courses. The hardest of which, I got to tell you, I think that I ever took was Weapons Systems Engineering 2, second semester. The first semester being kind of fun. They talk about, how to build everything from a grenade to a nuke, some of the basic equations for that. But the second semester was building the mathematical equations for why things operate. And that was pretty freaking hard, to be honest with you. So, even though there's an interest level there, I have a friend of mine from the Naval Academy who's a PhD in astrophysics, I believe it is. A great guy. We banter. We had this really long talk about the causality problems of going faster than light. We get into all this high level, that stuff. So from that point of view, I love Neil deGrasse Tyson. He's a very knowledgeable guy in science. He's a very good, like you said, a very good speaker.
Yep.
He presents well. My biggest beef with him is that two things. Number one, I think that the evidence for evolution is not as concrete as he makes it out. I think that there are a lot of scientific problems with the theory of evolution that I'm more than willing to get into at some point, maybe at a later date. But the other thing is he scoffs at the religious side as though you shouldn't even waste your time looking there, and then, goes on to essentially, attempt to defame what the Bible teaches. And one of his favorite quotes that he says is, back in the days of the flat earthers, and what he's really trying to say is that, those stupid Bible people, used to teach people that the earth was flat. No, we didn't. There were some churches that taught that, specifically the Catholic Church, and nothing against Catholics, I love Catholic people, but that was a Catholic doctrine. But if you go in the Bible itself and you just read it, you go to the book of Isaiah, and I'll just turn to, I guess, this right here, Isaiah chapter 40, and you come on down here to verse 22, it says, "It is he that sitteth upon the circle of the earth." It tells you right there that the earth's round. Right. So, this idea that the Bible teaches the earth is flat and therefore you can just throw it out the window is ridiculous. So that's an example of where I have differences with him. When it comes to, other things, my other beef with him is that, that he'll tell you, if you just listen to him talk, he'll tell you, I've even heard him say it on his podcast, science today understands about 4% of the observable universe. That means that there's 96% of it, 96% of it that we don't understand, and so
right.
Therefore, what you have to say is that how many times has science been proven wrong when you stood there emotionally defending it for 50, 100, 200 or more years, and then you finally realize that it was wrong,
right.
And during all time, you have human beings that are dying to learn the truth, and both figuratively and literally. And if these sacred texts have any bearing on what the truth is, you've got a book here that says, hey, you have a soul, and when you die, that soul exists eternally, and we have a creative being that is beyond our capacity to fully understand, that is perfectly just, that is going to judge you. Okay, well, if that's true, don't you think it's important to know what he said?
Well, there's also an issue that I have with that statement in itself. We're saying that, there's a being that is there to judge us, an ever-loving being. But who is the person, or who is the one that carried that information out first? I mean, God didn't come down here, made himself present to everybody, and said, "Okay, I'm God. God's here now, and guys, you got to write a book about me because I want my story told. I want you guys to know about me. There's going to be an Old Testament, a New Testament, a Hebrew Testament. There's going to be a Torah. There's going to be a Quran. Everybody's going to be talking about me. There's going to be about 50 religions. Don't worry about all the information. It all means that I am real. I am God. I am all powerful. I am the Alpha, the Omega, all that stuff. That never happened. The Bible's every single work of religious instrument has been written by men for their own agendas to back up whatever their issues and their agendas and their ideals were. In fact, I would even go as far as saying that every single biblical record that's ever been done, or every biblical book, has been nothing more than a way to indoctrinate and condition society to follow along in a certain system, in a certain set of rules, where there wasn't any at that time, where men were more ignorant than anything else. And so they said, okay, the word of God, that'll scare them. In fact, let's say this all-loving God is also a vengeful God. If you don't follow his ways, you'll burn in hell. That makes a whole lot of sense, right? Let's put in the book also that slavery is A-OK by God, because guess what? People need slaves, so let's go and do that. You know what the Bible's to me really is about a 6 to 8 mile radius around a certain individual, and he wrote about what was going on between that 6 to 8 mile radius around him, and those stories made it into the Bible. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff in antiquity of the Nephilim and all that stuff, and a lot of those stories get taken from mythology, like even, for example, the flood. All that comes is, that story is listed from the Trials of Gilgamesh, which is an old mythological tale. There's a lot of stuff that is written and has been worked into these books, Lance, where if you really dissect it, yeah, it's great to have faith in a lot of this stuff, but when you really think about who wrote this stuff, it wasn't God. God never came down here and wrote anything. God, as far as I know, does not have a literary credit to his name. He doesn't. So that's my problem with all religious works. It was not written by God. It was written by a guy sitting down in a robe in the middle of the night with a candle or something lit thousands of years ago, or a couple thousand years ago, or 500 years ago, or 200 years ago, or even 50 years ago, or a couple years ago when they rewrote the Bible again. So, I mean, that's the people that are writing the Bible. And who are those people to write a religious work? Why are they doing it? That is what we have to ask. Why are they trying to indoctrinate the planet to follow along a certain rule and doing it for such a long time? Remember, 2,000 years ago, or 2,000 plus years ago now, we had something called the Old Roman Empire, and that got transformed into the New Roman Empire, which we're still all living under. That was done by a certain individual who orchestrated the whole thing that we all know as Jesus Christ, and we all worship Jesus Christ, right? Jesus Christ. Oh, that was his name. He was born on December 25th, but yet he really wasn't, and that really wasn't his name. His name was Joshua of Aramea, supposedly. That's what they say, right? Christ just is a figure. It's an anointment. It means he was a king. That's what Christ means. People are ignorant even to that fact. People don't know their own religious history, and they don't know where a lot of this stuff comes from. And honestly, I'm completely aware of all religious works. I've read a lot of the stuff, and it's amazing to me how people throw away facts and they just look at it and say, okay, I got to have faith. It's all about faith.
Okay.
Got to believe it.
Sure. I'm glad that you went, because I want to address that. Okay, one of the things that I came to the conclusion of is that some of the things you're pointing out are half truths. Okay, and let me tell you what I mean by that. All right, if you had all the religious texts ever written laid side by side, there is one thing about the Bible that makes it different from all the rest of them. And that is prophecy that always comes true extremely accurately.
Let's talk about that. What prophecies have come true? Let's talk about that. Let's stop right there, and go into that part of what you just said. What prophecies have come true?
I have my favorites. There's been hundreds of them come true perfectly. Okay. One of them I mention to the listeners, and we'll get into this, is if you go back in the book of Nehemiah, this is an Old Testament book, chapter 2. There is essentially a commandment to rebuild Jerusalem. And this ties in with a prophecy from Daniel chapter 9. And essentially, and I'm not going to quote it right this moment because we want to really keep moving. I want to hit this real quick and keep pressing forward. And that is, it basically says that there's going to be a certain period of time between the commandment to rebuild Jerusalem till the presentation of Jesus as the Messiah. Okay? And if you dig all that out and you spend time digging out the numbers, what you find is that commandment to rebuild Jerusalem was given on March 14th, 445 BC. And the number of days that you're told that it's going to be in between those two is 173,880 days exactly. So what day did Jesus present himself as the Messiah? Well, if you do the numbers, you run through the calendars, and you're very meticulous, what you find is that day was April 6, 32 AD. And as it turns out, that's exactly 173,880 days.
Okay.
For one example, okay? There's hundreds of those. Let me give you another cool one.
I could actually answer that example and tell you how that's not a valid example. If you are to believe that Jesus was a real person and really lived and walked the earth, sure, you could say, okay, yeah, that might be a real example. But here's the thing: I'm not a believer that Jesus walked the earth personally. I think Jesus was an amalgamation of different characters put together to brainwash society. to brainwash the masses. For me, there's been no credible evidence that a person named Jesus Christ ever walked the earth. There is credible evidence that his figure was created out of the god Horus from Egypt, and he was created out of the image of Caesar Caesarion, the son of Julius Caesar and Cleopatra. There is stories of that individual that matches Jesus' story to a T, including Joseph and Mary, Mary Magdalene. All these names are in that person's storyline also, but nobody calls him Jesus. They called him Little Caesar or Caesar Caesarion. Why did that happen? Why is his story omitted from the Bible? Because the Bible's creating a figure and using lifted information from other individuals to fit exactly what you're talking about, which is a prophecy. Because that's how they indoctrinated people. They wanted to say, okay, let's make this look believable. Let's create the prophecy that's in this work. And people will believe it and will say, you see, the Bible is right. There's a prophecy coming through right there. And that could have easily happened 2,000 years ago.
That comes down to something very fundamental. Let me ask you a question.
Sure.
Do you believe Washington was the first president of the United States?
I wasn't there to see it, but there is enough proof to say that he was.
I would argue that there is all kinds of proof that a person named Jesus walked the earth, no matter what.
That's arguable to many extents. In fact, there's no reported historian that spoke about Jesus until 400 or 300 years after the death of Jesus. In fact, it was prohibited in that time period for anybody to write about Jesus or to put any imagery, artwork or anything that depicted the image of Jesus. That was prohibited by the new Roman Empire when they created their empire. This is a fact, and no story was ever written about this Jesus until they created their figure, masked him, and put him perfectly out there for the masses to absorb who he was, and gave enough time in passing to, people would not know if really 400 years ago or 300 years ago this person existed and did all these things. They just wouldn't know. How are you supposed to tell somebody 2,000 years ago that, this is not true? They don't know any better. They're reading what they're being told, or they're being told something and they're ignorant to the facts. So they wouldn't know any better. Back then it was a lot easier to indoctrinate anybody into believing stuff because there was no education like there is today. You see what I'm saying?
That's your interpretation of the facts. I mean, I've read all that stuff. Okay, and I know what you're saying, but what I'm telling you is that you even date your birthday from his birthday. There's mounds of evidence that a real person named Jesus that fit this profile existed. Way more evidence than even me. I don't know
about that. You're talking to me on the phone right now, so I know you exist.
Yeah, but that's for you. The people after I'm dead and gone 100 years from now, there won't be any special evidence other than...
Not true. Your book will be out there. There might be a couple movies, Lance, so that might be out there. There'll be evidence. You think in a couple hundred years they're going to forget who George Lucas is? No, they're not going to forget him. He's going to be legendary forever. In 500 years, they're still going to talk about Michael Jackson, George Lucas, Elvis Presley, the figures that create this legendary, iconic status to themselves. Jesus was the first cartoon character that was created by the Vatican to indoctrinate people. He was literally the first comic book character created to indoctrinate the masses. That's what Jesus was.
Look, that's what I'm trying to tell you is that all comes down to your source document, okay? And the Bible stands on its own as authoritative. And there's more than just what I gave you. I gave you one example of hundreds. Okay.
Let's go to the next example
of these things coming together, okay? Let me give you another good one. This is one of my favorites. It's a very little-known one, okay? In the Torah, which is the first 5 books of Moses, right? You have a genealogy from Adam to Noah back in Genesis chapter 5. Okay, so what you have is you have this guy Moses. Whether you wouldn't, no matter what you believe about him, he wrote these things down. Okay, and one of the things he wrote was these things that we read in the book of Genesis. Okay, so what you have to do is you got to make a graph. So if you can imagine, and this is just one, man, there's hundreds of these. If you can imagine, I had a chalkboard, and I took the names from Adam to Noah as in generations of 10. It's 10 generations, and put them in a list. Okay, so you have Adam, Seth, Mahalalel, and whatever down to Noah, and then next to their name you put what their name means in Hebrew. Okay, so next to it, for example, the name Adam means man. It's pretty straightforward. The name Seth means appointed. And, you go down the list and you get down to Noah, and the name Noah in Hebrew means rest or comfort. And then what you got to do is, if you can imagine that, you take the right column of the meaning of the names and you read down as a sentence. You know what it says? It says this: man was appointed mortal sorrow. The blessed God shall come down teaching that his death shall bring the despairing comfort. So what you have is hidden in the text, written 1500 BC or whatever, thereabouts, by a guy named Moses. You have the New Testament gospel written into the genealogy that was listed. So the idea that Moses knew what he was doing when he wrote that, and it just kind of happened to work out that way, is ridiculous. That is what's called a fingerprint of the Holy Spirit, okay? Giving him information that he probably didn't even know what the heck was going on. He was just writing the genealogy.
Repeat that quote again for Moses.
Man, this. Now you got to get this by following the pattern I'm giving you. You put the meaning of the names of the genealogy from Adam to Noah in a column, and it's what their names mean in Hebrew, and then you read down that column like a sentence. And the sentence reads this: man was appointed mortal sorrow. The blessed God shall come down teaching that his death shall bring the despairing comfort. That's the New Testament gospel, hidden in the genealogy from Adam to Noah in the Torah, one of the most considered by the Jews to be one of the holiest books of their Old Testament.
Agreed.
Right? Okay.
But here's an issue with that also. Is it not possible that somebody who is very creative came up with that 1,500 years before Christ?
Well, look.
As a story,
I doubt it.
Why do you doubt it? Look, we have right now. We have in this country. We've had how many countless cult movements over the last 40 years, from Waco, Texas, to what's going on with the Bundy Ranch now. Cult movements are not something that is new or just something that came up last week. They've been around forever. So who knows what Moses was up to, and who knows what these people are up to 15,000 years ago, 1,500 years ago, or whatever, coming up with these storylines. That's my point. The point is, though, it still goes back to man-written storylines. And yeah, I understand what you're saying, that the name means that, but it's still written by man.
I mean, you don't go scoffing at the idea of who Alexander the Great was, do you? I mean, so why all the attention on Jesus being fake? Because you don't like the message?
No, that's not the point. The point is it's brainwashing the masses and indoctrinating them on false pretenses
that story. Why not pick out other historical figures and talk about it?
There's all kinds of different issues that I have. Noah's flood, for example, that's lifted from the Trials of Gilgamesh.
Yeah, but we have scientific evidence that this happened in 4,400 BC. For example, you can go down to the Great Barrier Reef and see where the coral has regrown, and they can measure that out.
Yeah, I completely understand that, but here's the thing. In 4.6 billion years that this planet's been here, Lance, how many times have we not had certain incidents over the years where maybe a flood happened in a certain region of the world? And, we have floods all the time. We have tsunamis that happen on this planet, Lance. So who's not to say that somebody living in a part of the world who does not know any better says, oh, this must be a biblical event because we just had a flood, and they make it into a bigger thing than they are because they don't know anything outside of their region. Remember, they didn't have a Google map back then. They didn't know anything about the rest of the earth. So anything that happened locally to them was something biblical. A tsunami or something like that would have been biblical to them because they don't have CNN. They don't know about disasters all around the world. You know what I mean? So they wrote about their experiences. That's it.
That's just your interpretation of it. What I'm saying is that the text, if you take the text as it stands, the prophetical accounts cannot be completely thrown out. These things happen in hundreds of examples. I mean, we're touching on like two. I mean, I can give you another good one, okay? This is another one of my favorites, Psalm 22. You go in there, and any objective reader of the text can see that it's about somebody being crucified, no matter who you think it might be, okay? As a believer of the Bible, I would argue that it's talking about the Messiah, and we give a name to that person. We call him Jesus, who's supposed to be God manifest in the flesh. But if what you got to put together is that when that thing was written, and combine that together with the historical documentation that we have about when crucifixion was invented, and you see that there's a disparity which only shows that there's a prophecy there. Let me spell it out for you. You got this guy, this King David, writing this psalm, the song or whatever, And approximately, depending on the records, somewhere around, 1000 BC-ish, right in there. And you have him writing about someone being crucified. But if you look at the records, crucifixion wasn't invented until about 800 or 900 years later, and then was instituted by the Romans as a form of capital punishment in 100 BC. So what you have is a Jewish king sitting on a throne in Jerusalem writing about something that has not even been invented 900 years before it happened. Now, if it was just one of those, you might be able to do what you're doing and throw it out.
Well, how many things were not invented 40 years after Star Trek came out that Gene Roddenberry thought up and put on TV? Tablets, laptops, cell phones, flip phones, all kinds of things. Look, man has been creative since the beginning of mankind, and we've always had an imagination, and we've always created storylines and story arcs and things that we've always used to pass the time, especially back then where they didn't have the internet. Unfortunately, Al Gore hadn't invented it yet.
Yeah, right. Al Gore, God bless him, he's always putting his foot in his mouth over something. Anyway, that's a whole other story.
Global warming, not really, no. It's a process of the planet, Al, not global warming.
So what I would like the listener to see is that I'm not denying that anyone can have their view about these topics. What I'm saying is that the text is supported by the evidence much more than I believe that you're leading on, and it comes down to what is your source documentation and how do you prove it. And I think that one of the key elements that God has used is the prophetical accounts. And I'll say this again, it's not just a matter of me quoting you a couple verses and saying something happened. It's a matter, if you take the time to dig this stuff out and look at all the historical records that are out there that are available, there are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of these things that have come true perfectly.
No, I understand that, but let me interject here, and I know Joseph has a question for you in a second, and I'm going to let him ask. We only have like 10 minutes left, by the way, or 8 minutes left. But let me interject here real quick. Let's say, for example, right, you have a story, and you want to put that story out there, and you write the story out, and you make a great storyline, and you put it out there, and it's something that it was 2,000 years ago, and people are working the masses with this storyline. How easy do you think 2,000 years ago would be to create a storyline that would reach the masses and fool them?
Well, the trouble with it is if you're right every time, you have to say there's something to that, right? I mean, because we're arguing it.
And this is where I'm going with this, Lance. Stories that get created by people with ideas, right, could have prophetic stuff in them, because I could say, for example, hey, there's going to be an earthquake on California, and thousands of people are going to die, and it's going to happen real soon. And just leave that out there. And in about 20, 30 years, if something like that does happen, does that mean I'm a prophet?
No, but what I'm saying is if you gave the exact day, that would say something. And that's what the Bible does. Is that it isn't.
It gives certain things, and again, it's certain dates that man could make happen to follow the prophecy.
Exact dates. There are so many things in there that come true exactly the way it predicted that you have to say there's something to that. Because what we're arguing is that if there is this creative being that it talks about when we call him God, you would like to assume that he would know the end from the beginning, right? I mean, he's going to know.
You would hope so. You would hope so, right?
If that's the case, then he can never be wrong in his predictions. And that's what we're arguing is that the Bible does that. It does it perfectly.
Unfortunately, though, you gotta admit, though, God, he gets questioned a lot, because if God is perfect, if God is, infallible, then we're all part of His creation. But yet in the Bible, He hates gay people. So what's that about? We're all part of His creation. You know what I mean? So why hate them? Why is there slavery in the Bible? There's so many things in the Bible which are kind of kooky to really think about, especially now in 2014, that you look at and you're like, yeah, this was definitely written by people that didn't know any better. Like slavery, really? Slavery is not cool any time, period. Doesn't matter when. Slavery is just not cool to do to people. Nobody should be a slave to anybody. But guess what? In the Bible, it says it's justified. There's even justification for it. So we're short on time, though. I do want to get to Joseph's question, though. I'm sorry to cut you off, Lance, but Joseph, jump on in. I know you had a question, and I wanted to let you ask.
I've had many. But I'm just going to put something out there. We're talking about, what's the show about here today? It's about unidentified flying objects, and so we're stretching, we're going into religion, we're pulling out all these aspects. What we didn't talk about, Lance kind led into this. He's talking about Moses being led by the Spirit, and I think you mentioned that, right, Lance? Like the Holy Spirit. Yeah. Okay, so one thing there I'd like to say is, since we're talking about ETs and possibility of UFOs and that, how do you know where this information that he received at that time wasn't kind of like channeled information that people currently get today? That's my one question. My second question is, we didn't talk about time travelers and the possibility that, because there's a lot of people that attest that some of these UFOs are us from the future that have figured out how to bend space and time and have traveled back. And if that is a possibility, then how do you know that the Bible or any other book
hasn't been manipulated? Yeah, hasn't been manipulated
because they know you're talking about a God that knows the end from the beginning and vice versa. And so how do you know that this, and I'm just putting this out there, these aren't my beliefs, by the way, they're just
we only have a couple minutes, so Lance, you want to answer that? Because we only have like a couple minutes left. You want to answer that real quick? It's a loaded question.
No, I want to try to answer it, and we need to do this again because there's a lot to get into that we glossed over, okay? What I believe there is this. I think that there are these other beings that we're dealing with. They are out. This is what I personally believe, although I don't have direct evidence, okay? I believe that the chances are high that these other beings exist, but the root of it is based on what I told you before with the angels that left their first estate and then had offspring, and they brought with them in that transformation that intelligence. And so what they did is that, yes, they created these, technologies and things like that we see evidence of, right? So if the question is what about some other beings? Yeah, I think they're out there, absolutely. Where I would differ with science is that I don't believe that they evolved from an amoeba, really, if you track that down, you got to say they came from a rock, right? I mean, there was no organic matter on the earth until, according to them, until it, got struck by lightning in a pool of goo, and then eventually created some kind of organic piece, right? So ultimately, you got to say, if you believe in evolution, then you track it all the way back to rocks, okay? Now, what I'm saying is that you have to get into the origin of where these beings may have come from. And so in this case, what you're dealing with is I don't believe that they evolved on Orion, for example, but that they went there after starting here based on what I was saying in the beginning. That's the basis. So that still had an origin here, but who knows how far that could go. And, we really didn't finish it, the chain of thinking on that whole thing. I've got a whole thing that I'd like to lay out another day about how far that can go.
Oh, we'll definitely have to have you back on, Lance, very, very soon. I mean, I know people thought, oh, man, they were getting into a heated argument about religion. But no, look, this is all fun to talk about this stuff on the radio. And I have a blast anytime anybody brings up the religious topic and deals with ufology also at the same time and all that stuff. Now, we are almost out of time. I do want to give you a chance to plug the website and the book one more time before we get off air and when that's going to be released. It sounds like a really neat book, so I hope everybody checks it out as soon as it comes out. And we want to have you back on. In fact, the book's going to be out in a few weeks. Once the book is released, I want to have you back on so we could talk a little bit more on it in a few weeks from now. So let's plug the website again. It's what's the website? Give it to the audience.
So we got bloodofagod.com is the website. The actual title of the book is The Blood of a God. You can actually go to my Facebook. We have a fan page on Facebook for the book. Just search in there in the search engine, The Blood of a God. I've got about 1,500 fans or so as of today. I've been posting concept art for the book that connects up with what's going on in the book, so you can kind of get a visual idea of what's going on. And if you're interested, you can do a pre-order for $4 off. If you go to the website, there's a section on the website, bloodofagod.com, for ordering in the pre-order stage right now. And if you pre-order, you get that $4 off the retail price through our website. It'll be available on all the major places, Amazon.com, BarnesandNoble.com, of course through us, and then also Nook, Kindle, iTunes, I believe. That's what I'm being told as of today. And then you can look for it to be out in about 3 weeks or so. So right in there.
Very cool, and we'll definitely have you back on so we could talk a little bit more and continue this conversation because you're a fascinating person to talk to, Lance. I really enjoyed having you on, and it's a shame that we're out of time here on Skywatchers Radio. Guys, for my co-host tonight, Joseph Mara, and for Alan, who's off tonight, and for our great guest, Lance Burton, who's been just fascinating tonight. Thank you for listening in. For Keith Rowland and the Dark Matter Radio Network crowd, Thank you all, and we'll be back next week with another fascinating episode here on Skywatchers Radio. We have Justin Brown, who's going to be on the show with us. Justin Brown of Unified Field Radio himself. So look forward to talking to him, and please come back and listen to that show. Guys, we're all out of time. We will see you next week.